Group behind Project 2025 urges FBI to brand transgender extremists a domestic terror threat. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, the ultra-conservative Heritage Foundation proposed a broad definition of extremist rhetoric that would seemingly cover a wide range of pro-LGBT plus activism. So basically, I have no clue why in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, since the shooter is not even trans, but whatever. It seems like anything and everything can be blamed on trans people, and increasingly not just trans rights will be taken away, but also trans people will be branded as shooters and extremists. That is the world that we live in, I guess.
You've got the majority in the House. You're back in session. Is this something that could be on the table with the Speaker, something to bring back mental institutions? I don't care what you call them, but a place where people can get the treatment that they need so this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, we need to do that, Rob. Absolutely. We need to stop these doctors, these pediatricians that have gone for years now, that have taken 12 and 14-year-olds and convinced them that they should do the gender transition.
Yeah, doctors convince people that they should do the transition. That is totally how that works. That is totally how gender affirming care works. They just persuade teens, you want to be trans, yeah, please go transition. Here's your first hit of the hormones. It's the first one's for free, but you're gonna have to pay for the next one. Conrad says, sometimes I forget how dumb an average person is, because who buys it? I understand being confused about trans people, disliking them, you know what I mean, but this is really silly. Yeah, it is. And I can't even understand I can't actually understand not understanding it, or being even a bit, apprehensive. But this is just, it's all an opportunity to attack trans people. It's always an opportunity to just attack trans people. Yeah, Charlie Kirk was shot by some dude. Therefore, it's all about doctors convincing teens to be trans, of course.
They put them on hormones. They've mutilated their bodies. They've cut their breast off. They've cut their genitalia off. And a lot of these people were just...
Yeah, all these things that are, first of all, not happening. And second of all, it's not how these surgeries work. Conrad says it's cheap populism to keep on the anti-woke narrative. Yeah. Yep. And it's working, unfortunately, because as I said before, as I've said a million times, it's easier to spread lies and misinformation than to educate people on things, which is, again, why I'm not a fan of having the fascist club on campus.
They were confused because they were going through puberty, and it's a natural thing. And they preyed upon them, and they convinced them that there was something wrong with them. And now they're in this...
What do you mean you're just showing your hand? What do you mean they're convincing them that there's something wrong with them? Nobody says that if you're, apart from conservatives and people like you, that if you're trans, that there's something wrong with you. Like, only people like you say that there's something wrong with you if you're trans.
Position years down the road where they have legitimate psychiatric issues related to the stuff that they've been exposed to and the things that they've been told and the stuff that
is really insidious and really dangerous, by the way, to blame, to do this witch hunt on medical professionals. Do I really have to explain why it's dangerous, why it's a dangerous precedent to set to attack medical professionals in this way? That do not try to convince people of anything. They just try to treat people in the best way based on their observation. That is what's happening. They're trying to choose the best possible course of action for their patients. They're not trying to convince people into being trans. That's stupid. Why would they even? What is the incentive for doctors to do that? Why exactly would doctors do that? Why would they even gain from doing that?
Happened to them. We have to do something about this. We have to treat these people. We have to get them off the streets, and we have to get them off the internet.
Off the streets?
Can't let them communicate with each other. I'm all about free speech, but this is a virus. Internet. We have to treat the things that they've been told and the stuff that's happened to them. We have to do something about this. We have to treat these people. We have to get them off the streets, and we have to get them off the internet. We can't let them communicate with each other. I'm all about free speech, but this is a virus. This is a cancer that's spreading across this country.
Yes. Trans people are a virus. Okay, great. Thank you.
That's going to do great damage to normal, hardworking, law-abiding people.
Mm-hmm. There you go. There you have it. The narrative is pretty clear. The influential conservative tank behind Project 2025 has urged the FBI to treat violent transgender ideology as a new domestic terror threat. What is violent transgender ideology? So basically, if you're a trans person, you are a terrorist. You're a domestic terror threat if you're a trans person. That's basically it. That is basically the translation of this whole narrative, which I'm not surprised because trans people do seem to be public enemies number one these days. If you're trans, then you're crazy, you're a shooter in the making, you're an extremist, you're a terrorist, you're everything that's worse. Even Vladimir Putin at some point has said that he's actually invading Ukraine because of wokeness, trans people, and because J.K. Rowling is being persecuted in the West. Conrad asks, what needs to happen to get the political climate shift from right to, let's say, center? What does Trump need to do to break his voters? I feel, although I don't even know anymore, I felt for some time that if American people would start feeling the economic impact of Trump, what Trump's doing, then they would start turning against him. Well, I mean, Trump's, as far as I understand, is not very popular right now. And people are starting to feel the economic impact of his policies. I think farmers were hit by his, the eggs are cheaper. I think farmers were hit by his tariff policy. So they're starting to be unhappy with that. And I feel like the only way for Trump voters to turn against him is for them to feel the economic impact. I don't think any cultural thing will move them. I think if anything, it's gonna have to be their wallets getting impacted. That's it. In my opinion, of course. Maybe I'm wrong, but that is how I feel it would go. And Trump's not very good for the economy, so I don't know. We'll see. In a petition launched on Thursday, the Heritage Foundation, along with its spin-off group, the Oversight Project, called on the agency to add transgender ideology-inspired violent extremism, aka TIVE, to its list of domestic extremist groups, so that it could detect, disrupt, and dismantle TIVE cells. So basically, it's a whole new way of attacking the trans community. Preemptively branding them as terrorists, as extreme elements, and yeah. They cited the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which has nothing to do with trans people, as only the latest example in a long line of homegrown terrorists brainwashed by trans ideology. No evidence of that whatsoever. There's no evidence of any trans person really affecting the choice to shoot Charlie Kirk. It's all just assumptions, it's all just speculation, as always. Though evidence for such a trend is thin at best. There you go. In other words, there's no evidence whatsoever. As per usual with those people. Oh, there was a trans person somewhere in the background that cooperated with the authorities when it came to the capture of the shooter. Oh, it must have been trans ideology then. It must have been trans ideology that made the shooter do it, of course. Of course. For example, according to a gun violence archive, around 0.1% of mass shootings that took place over the last 10 years were carried out by transgender people. A study from the Violence Prevention Project at Hamline University backs this up. PolitiFact also reported found that trans people are more likely to be victims of violence than their cisgender peers. I mean, it's just, those are such obvious things. Like, it's so obvious that trans people are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators or than their cisgender peers. And while the Heritage Foundation and the Oversight Project insisted that they were not accusing all trans people of being terrorists, but I don't believe that. The Republic explanation of TIVE rhetoric appeared extremely broad. Yeah, because in reality, they do want to attack all trans people. But it would not be very good optics, so they have to, they have to disguise it a little bit. You just have to make it broad enough that you seem not to be attacking all trans people, but in reality you are, very much so. encompassing many arguments made by trans rights activists. Yeah, because this whole thing is basically just created. This whole thing is by design. It's designed to attack trans activists, those who try to protect trans rights. TIVE adherents have carried out horrific acts of political violence through assassination and targeted mass shootings of Christians in furtherance of their ideology. Yeah, because what does that even mean? Said the Oversight Project. Yeah, people are being shot in adherence to the trans ideology. What are the tenets of the trans ideology? I'd like to know. I'd like someone to tell me. The time has come for the federal government to use the full weight of federal law enforcement to crush this threat, to keep Americans safe. Yeah, because trans people are such a threat to America. The Heritage Foundation is known for its close ties to both Trump administrations. The second Trump administration has followed many Project 2025 proposals. The Oversight Project was previously part of the Heritage Foundation until being spun off as an independent entity earlier this year. Its president, Mike Howell, remains a visiting fellow at Heritage. The petition dovetails with a years-long effort by many within the MAGA movement to smear America's estimated 2.8 million trans people as exceptionally violent, unstable, and prone to perpetrating mass shootings. 2.8 million people. That's quite a lot, actually. That is quite a big number of trans people. And as far as I know, I've heard statistics quoted that there have been five shootings done by trans people in the US within the last few years. 5 people out of 2.8 million. Yeah, that's a really big problem. Yeah, those trans people are a really big problem. Persönliche Videospiel Ostpolice says, remember when in the life of Brian, Moses dropped the third tablet with 5 other tenants? Maybe they mean those, who knows? Probably, yeah. Yeah, the petition dovetails with a year-long effort by many within the MAGA movement to smear America's estimated 2.8 million trans people as exceptionally violent, unstable, and prone to perpetrating mass shootings. Because, of course. In the immediate aftermath of Kirk's death, the Wall Street Journal published a report alleging, wrongly as it turned out, that shell casing had been found etched with messages of transgender ideology. I still would like an explanation of what transgender ideology exactly is and what are its tenets, so I can better, follow it. So I can follow my ideology in a more encompassing way. Does that make sense? I'm a trans person. I don't even know my own ideology. It's pretty embarrassing, to say the least. Prompting a response from the Human Rights Campaign. This reporting was reckless and irresponsible. Well, you should know shit. It's not irresponsible, it's not reckless, okay? It's deliberate. It's a deliberate attack on trans people. And it led to a wave of threats against the trans community from right-wing influencers. I'm sorry, but right-wing influencers, they just need an excuse, okay? Right-wing influencers hate trans people. It's not any resulting wave of terror for a community that is already living in fear, the organization said in a press release. California State Senator Scott Wiener likewise said, the obsession with tying trans people to shootings is vile and dangerous. I mean, trans people have been on the receiving end of a harassment campaign for years now. They're the biggest boogeyman of the right. Like, no matter what conversation you're having with a right-wing person, no matter what debate they're having, they will open with, how many genders are there? What do you think about the transes? We've seen this time and time and time again. No matter what political debate is being had, sooner or later, trans rights topic will be brought up. Inevitably. Trans people will be brought up. First, they tried to say shooters might be trans, and WSJ amplifies that lie. Once that fell apart, they pivot to, he lived with a trans person. Even if true, who cares? It's McCarthyism and truly disgusting. it follows Donald Trump's declaration that he would designate Antifa, a loose, decentralized left-wing anti-fascist movement with no clear hierarchy or structure, a major terrorist organization, which we will be talking about as well. I'm late to the party on this one, but we will be talking about Trump designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. Things are happening faster and faster. Insane. Transgender ideology is violent at its core. Yeah, I will ask once again for an explanation what transgender ideology even is, because I have no clue. The US government lacks the legal authority to designate US organizations as terrorist groups. Still, the FBI maintains a list of broad domestic terrorist classifications such as racially, ethnically motivated violent extremism, anti-government, anti-authority violent extremism, and abortion-related violent extremism. In Thursday explanation, the Oversight Project and Heritage explicitly avowed that not all trans people or their supporters should be treated as terrorists, and that individuals are free to identify as transgender or support transgenderism in a non-violent way, whatever that means. Because I would like to remind you that this sentence says transgender ideology is violent at its core, okay? At its core.
Radicals on the right as well. We have radicals on the left. People are watching all of these videos and cheering. Some people are cheering that Charlie was killed. How do we fix this country? How do we come back together?
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. They don't want to see crime.
Worried about the border.
They're saying, we don't want these people coming in. We don't want you burning our shopping centers. We don't want you shooting our people in the middle of the street. The radicals on the left are the problem. And they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy. Although they want men and women sports, they want transgender for everyone, they want open borders. The worst thing that happened...
What does that mean? They want transgender for everyone. What does that even mean? And here is Trump basically... this is Trump lowering the atmosphere. This is Trump lowering the temperature by saying, oh yeah, no, right-wing extremists are actually good. The right-wing extremists are fighting for the good cause, while the left-wing extremists are vicious and horrible, and they're trying to destroy the country. Wow, okay. No bias there. I don't give a damn. The right-wing extremists are good, and the left-wing people are bad. It's just, that is what it is. They want transgender for everyone. They defined TIVE as encompassing any potentially unlawful threats of violence or incitement intended to further ideological agendas derived from transgender ideology. Again, whatever that means, whatever that term means. They're worried about the border. The far-right extremists are simply worried about the border. They simply don't want crime. Of course. One such agenda, they said, was the belief that violence is justified against people who oppose transgender ideology or who are silent or indifferent. Okay, first of all, I have no idea what transgender ideology is. Second of all, I do not believe that the violence is justified against people who oppose this non-existent ideology, okay? There's no such thing as transgender ideology. I still challenge people to tell me what that even is. What is that even supposed to mean? Well, the other agenda, quote unquote, was far broader. The belief that anti-trans rhetoric or policies constitute a form of violence towards trans people, or that they threaten trans people's lives by contributing to the community's high suicide rate. I mean, anti-trans rhetoric and policies do constitute a form of violence against trans people. That's just undeniable. Believe it or not, robbing people of their rights is a form of persecution against people. If adopted by the FBI, that would brand a wide range of arguments common among progressive activists and writers as extremist rhetoric. Because, yeah, that is the entire purpose of this. To shut people up when they try to defend trans rights. Because the Trump administration is working very hard to deprive trans people of rights. And we will find ourselves in a situation when the Trump administration will introduce more and more executive orders, I suppose, that will deprive trans people of more and more rights. And whenever people will protest or criticize it or do anything else that would try to fight for the rights of trans people, they will be branded as extremists. That is exactly what is going to happen now. It's unclear what the two campaign groups meant by potentially unlawful or what they would define as incitement. Yet, in follow-up posts on social media, the Oversight Project claimed that accusing conservatives of wanting to eradicate trans people was Thai rhetoric that leads people to justify violence. There you go. Just as I said, fighting for trans rights, it's Thai rhetoric that leads people to justify violence. If you fight for trans rights, you're an extremist. So according to the Heritage Foundation, a trans person who points out that Daily Wire commentator Michael Knowles has called for our eradication should be designated a violent extremist by the FBI? Yes. The answer is yes. Ask Ari Drennan of the left-wing campaign group Media Matters for America. The answer is, of course, yes. If we are to interpret what is being said here, then the answer, of course, is yes. The Heritage Foundation and Oversight Project further gave a list of terminology used by Thais, which included widely used terms such as cisgender, dead naming, and misgendering. So basically, yeah, wanting any sort of, I guess, yeah, basically advocating for trans people is designated as extremism. Allowing any sort of dignity for trans people, that's extremism. That's basically terrorism. Awful. Also listed was Gillick competence, a legal term originating in British case law, which defines the point at which a person under 16 can consent to medical treatment, such as contraception, abortion, or hormone therapy without their parents' permission or knowledge. They gave 11 examples of attacks on people or property said to be motivated by TIVE, including Kirk's shooting, which is nonsense. It has nothing to do with trans people whatsoever. Like, no trans people were involved in the shooting, but only four appeared to have any political motive. One of the 11 was Minneapolis shooter Robin Westman, whose diary expressed regret about transitioning, and echoed the Heritage Foundation's own rhetoric by saying they felt brainwashed into it. Of course. To understand transgender ideology is to understand that at its core, it's wrapped in violence. At its very essence, said Mike Howell, because, of course, evidence, that's not needed. We all have to just follow our vibes on this one. The group said it would soon submit a formal mock designation for the FBI to implement and would publish this once it was ready, because trans people are not persecuted enough, I guess. What we know about the motive for Kirk's killing, we really don't know much. I can skip reading this and I just can say we don't know much. That is the reality of the situation. We do not know much about the motivation for Charlie Kirk's killing. There you go. So yeah, I guess, what can I say? If the Trump administration has its way and the people from the Project 2025, I will be designated an extremist within the US, because I do advocate for trans rights. I'm a trans person myself, and I guess I'm inherently violent somehow. So yeah, there we go.